Smart public policy is critical to ensuring that AI is developed and deployed in ways that maximize its potential, but also minimize its potential risks. Today, I'm joined by Chandler Morse, Vice President of Public Policy at Workday, who's going to share some insights on the critical role that public policy plays in fostering AI innovation, while also staying true to social and ethical values. Welcome, Chandler. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Before we dive in, can you tell us a bit about your background and your current role at Workday?
So I am Vice President for Public Policy. I manage our corporate affairs function, which includes public policy engagement teams in the US, as well as global public policy engagement. We have teams in Brussels, UK, and Singapore, and as well as sustainability and operations and reporting.
That's great. So it seems like there's growing awareness about AI in the public policy circles. Can you tell us a bit about what's going on there?
I think there's a growing expectation among civil society groups, companies like Workday, among policymakers, that AI is both developed and used in a way that builds trust and is trustworthy. A lot of it has to do with, I think that conversation's been going on for a little while, but clearly AI sort of exploded onto the scene in recent months, and just as that explosion on the scene in some of the use cases and the proliferation into our lives, public policy officials have been taking note and really turning their attention to it.
Yeah, and you said in a recent interview with Politico that public policy can really help build trust in the development of AI. Can you talk about what that looks like at Workday?
Yeah, so for Workday, we're really focused on providing concrete policy proposals that can both build trust in AI as well as support innovation. And so for us, the sort of start of that conversation is that those policy proposals need to be risk-based. We really need to focus on the use cases that have a direct impact on people's lives. A couple of years ago, that was novel. I think we've really seen an evolution in thinking around AI public policy, and so that's sort of now table stakes in these proposals, which we think is great. In addition to that, we're really focused on sort of accountability tools that are sort of tried and true, that folks know and can put into place immediately. In that vein, we're really big proponents of the impact assessment approach. It's something we've seen in privacy and we think lends itself to AI really well. And lastly, there are a number of players in the AI landscape when it comes to developing and deploying. So there are the folks that build the AI, there are the folks that use the AI, they're sort of end users. And smart public policy tends to recognize those different roles and assign responsibilities to them really clearly. So in that way, we're sort of trying to give policymakers some options as they're thinking about these ideas.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know we've been active in the work with NIST and the framework that they've been putting together around that. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. The NIST AI risk management framework is sort of the next iteration of risk management frameworks that NIST has launched. They've done really great work on the cybersecurity framework, which has become a de facto global standard. They've done some work on the privacy framework, which they launched not long ago, and now it's sort of the next iteration of that. And it's really a valuable cookbook, frankly, for organizations that are starting to think about how to develop and use AI. It'll help drive those conversations around how to do that in a trustworthy and thoughtful way. It does provide a roadmap for how organizations can measure, map, manage, and govern their AI risk in a concrete set of kind of things to think about. It was directed by Congress to be established, which again sort of shows the level of interest in these issues, and was done in the way that NIST tends to do things, which is fully collaborative and bringing in industry voices like Workday's, bringing in academics, civil society, and really a collaborative approach to really thinking about how to tackle these issues.
Yeah, it's great to see that kind of real concrete progress on something tangible that we can use. Can you talk a bit about how that aligns with other industry standards and regulations?
Yeah, it's a great question. NIST is really the sort of high watermark in the U.S. for this kind of work. They are sort of the gold standard on standards, developing certifications, best management practices, and they do use that collaborative approach, which brings in not only the diverse voices that need to be heard in the landscape, but also just sort of ends up with a tremendous amount of buy-in when they come out the other end. NIST is, frankly, it's the cornerstone for enterprise technology governance. We were an early proponent and champion of getting NIST into the AI game. One, because we thought these tools really were necessary in the landscape. How do organizations, as they're starting to think about trust and responsible use, and what's the real game plan? And Second, the EU's moving forward on some AI governance, and we wanted something it's a kind of a common language and a bridge from the US to the conversations in Europe, and NIST was the perfect player to get that done.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned Europe. Can you talk about how things are evolving there?
Yeah, so they're evolving quickly. The EU has decided several years ago to regulate AI, and they've got a pretty good track record for when they make decisions to regulate a tech sector or a tech issue. They tend to be able to get it done. We've seen this with privacy. They passed the GDPR, which became kind of the de facto global standard for privacy. So they've taken a thoughtful approach. They're not sort of leaping in last minute. They sort of set up a high-level expert group and then did some consultations and prepared a legislative draft. That debate on that legislative draft is ongoing, has been ongoing for a little while, and is frankly ending its sort of end game. They'd like to get that proposal set by the end of this year and passed and implemented next year.
That's great. That's huge progress, right?
It is. We again, as I mentioned before, several years ago, a risk-based approach was kind of something that we needed to push, and now with sort of the EU making progress on their bill, their approach is a risk-based approach, and so it sort of has set the level on that. We again think it's probably going to go into effect, and so Workday has been working really closely with European policymakers to ensure that the requirements that are included in the EU AI Act are targeted and workable. That's
great. That's great. So beyond Brussels and Washington, can you tell us a bit about areas that you're focused on, what you're seeing out in the world?
Yeah, it's a great question because there's a lot of them. So we've talked about sort of this exponential growth in innovation on the AI side. I think just as fast a ramp as we've seen on the innovation side, we've seen it on the policymaker side. So we're involved in conversations right now in Canada. They've got a new bill out that we're taking a hard look at. UK, sort of post-Brexit, is kind of thinking about how they're going to handle AI issues. Singapore's been a player for a little while in this space and is continuing in the APJ region to sort of play a leadership role. And Japan just announced that they were going to update their AI national strategy. In addition to that sort of global arc, which is fascinating and super interesting, one of the other trends that we're seeing is that in the absence of congressional action in the U.S., we tend to see states fill the role. We saw it in privacy when Congress didn't act on a comprehensive privacy bill. California passed theirs, and then it sort of rippled across the country. The same conversations are happening now on AI. We're having conversations in places like California, where we're kind of trying to educate policymakers on, hey, there are some ways of handling this that are kind of tried and true, like the impact assessment approach, versus trying to start from scratch with things that are new that might take a little bit of time. Third-party auditing is kind of something that it's reached for pretty regularly, and in sectors like privacy or cybersecurity, it totally makes sense. There are mature standards that underlie it. But in areas like AI, where we don't have those standards, we're more focused on those tools that can get sort of short-term gains in building trust.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And like you said, the level of conversation, the innovation in this space is really paralleling along with the technology innovation. So it's really great to see some concrete frameworks and policies starting to come into place to help us work within. That's great. Are there any last thoughts you'd want to leave business leaders with?
I think one thing to be aware of and to just have in folks' heads is, we're seeing an increased level of kind of potential for international or global fragmentation. Mm-hmm. We're seeing new and evolving models around the future of work and sort of what that's going to look like. We're also seeing, as you mentioned, like tremendous innovation, this happening on a pace we haven't seen much or recently. As companies start to think about their own workforce and their own agility and how they're going to sort of handle these challenges, taking hold of technology like AI to really take a skills-based approach to scale is going to be essential. They're going to need to sort of take that technology and integrate it today to be ready for tomorrow. Smart policies around AI guardrails and ways of ensuring that can be done in a trustworthy way is critical to that.
Yep, that's great. Well, Chandler, thank you for the conversation today. Just a ton of insight out of that. That was super helpful. And thanks to all of you who joined us watching. We hope you have a great workday.